Now, Section 3 is critically important because it does a couple of things for the believer. First of all, it tells us how important our testimony is. The second thing is we talk about how to build it, how to develop it so that you might be able to share it in a very effective way. There are three parts to the testimony. The first part is this: my life before becoming a follower of Christ. And in that section, you talk about what was your life like before Jesus? Were you searching for truth? Was there an emptiness or a loneliness? Maybe even a lack of purpose in your life? Or maybe you were just having a great time and going in the direction that you wanted to do, but you knew that there was something missing in your life. And so that's when you begin to share that, because that is a critically important part of the testimony. The second part of your witnessing testimony is this: it's how I received Christ, or it's when you talk about how you came to know Jesus personally. Now, in this time, what you do is you share not only how you received Christ from the standpoint of that experience, but talk about maybe an individual who lived out their faith and you saw such a difference in their life, and they were very instrumentally used by God to help you to become more receptive to the gospel. And so you might share a little bit about that and then talk about that actual encounter in which you prayed and asked Christ to come in your life. Tell them where you were, maybe at a park or maybe at a gymnasium or maybe even at your home. And so that's when you share that experience. All right, now the third part of your testimony is how Jesus has changed your life since you came to know Him personally. This is so important because those that you're talking with will say, okay, so you're a Christian, you go to church, you have committed your life to Christ, so what? I haven't done that. So what is the difference in your life and mine? And that gives you the opportunity to talk about how Christ has added meaning to your life, given you a purpose and a sense of direction. I know when I committed my life to Christ, that which I had been longing for was immediately fulfilled. In fact, the direction of my life took on a whole new meaning. It was awesome because from the moment in which I committed my life to Christ to this very minute, there has not been a moment in which I wondered, what should I be doing or what's life all about? I know that now. And so you can share that with those, because I can promise you this: those who don't know Christ are looking for the answers that you can give them through Jesus. In the Bible, and in fact in the book of Acts, chapter 22, Paul actually shares his personal story, his testimony. In fact, starting in verse 3 through 5, he talks about his life before Christ and the things that he used to do, the things that he isn't very, very proud of. And then he talks about that encounter that he had when he said that the light shone brighter than the noonday sun, and that he heard a voice that spoke to him and called him out, in fact called out his name. And he responded, "Yes, Lord." And then he talks about now that he's received Christ, how is his life different? And so you can read Acts chapter 22 and see a biblical testimony there that's given to you as a great model. And there's quite a few others. But let me talk to you about the testimony, because a lot of times people say, is a testimony really that important, or how is it such an effective tool? Well, the first thing I want you to know about your story is this: your story has authority. So when you're sharing it with somebody, maybe it's a neighbor who's not a believer or a coworker, and you say, Jesus Christ has changed my life. Let me tell you how I was and how I am now. There's no one who's going to refute that. They're not going to say, oh, that didn't happen to you. They're going to listen to your story. It carries a tremendous amount of authority. The second thing is this: it communicates. They're listening to your story. They're listening to your experiences. And the third thing is they can relate to it. See, their experiences may not be the same as yours, but when they're going through a difficult time and they hear that you've been through a difficult time and the Lord helped you through that, they'll say, I wonder if the Lord could help me in the midst of this storm with my children or with my spouse or with whatever else they're going through. And so it relates to their life, or they're able to relate what you went through and your experiences to their own life. The final thing is so critically important. It's powerful. There's nothing like a story, a personal story of my life. In fact, when a preacher is preaching and he might be splitting a theological hair that would make every seminary professor just ooh and ah, and everybody else in the sanctuary is kind of bored and maybe yawning, But then he gets to a part where he says, what, my wife and I the other day got into an argument. Everybody wakes up, locks in, even the babies that are crying, quit crying. That old man in the choir that sleeps wakes up and looks and says, what in the world's going on here? The preacher's about to share something personal. There's nothing more powerful than a personal story that grabs the attention and the heart of people. And so your story is critically important. Now, someone might say, Thomas, I committed my life to Christ when I was 8 years old. I don't have one of these dramatic transformations of life. I don't have a drugs to Jesus type testimony. Can God still use my testimony? Well, absolutely. In fact, sometimes that story of being saved at age 8 and saved from something, not out of something, can be just as powerful for someone to hear. Of how a transformed life and how a life that now has meaning and purpose can really and truly start at age 8 and then continue on for the entire life. And so don't act like your story in any way would not be as powerful because you don't have some dramatic experience. The second thing is this: you can use a defining moment in your life, a time in which your faith was tested and tried and God came through in such a miraculous way that you were strengthened and that you were encouraged through that. That will speak and connect with that person who's listening, and they'll say, you know, you went through a difficult time and God was right there with you. And they'll say, you know, I need some strength sometimes. I feel lonely and empty and when I go through my difficult times. So use those things. Now, as we begin to write out our story, in your listening guide, you've got those 3 parts there. And as you look at those 3 parts, begin to write out under each of those headings your experience, your life, your story. Now, remember a couple of things. Number 1, 3 or 4 sentences will be adequate as you share each part. The second thing is try not to use words that a person might not understand, like sanctification or justification or those things, because they might not know what they mean. So use words that a person who may have never been to church before would understand. And the third thing is so critically important. Stress this, that since you've committed your life to Christ, you're not perfect. You still make mistakes, you still fail, but you can always go to Him and ask forgiveness. And the Bible says that He is faithful and just to forgive us of all unrighteousness. So now as you prepare that, write that out, and in just a few moments when you're done writing it, take the time to share it with someone that's sitting right there with you, maybe a partner or somebody that you can practice and role play sharing your story.